Ship 39 has finally come out to play, having rolled out to Massey's to begin its cryoproof test campaign ahead of Starship Flight 12. But why is it on the static fire stand? Does that mean it has engines? Ship 40 has also received its transfer tubes and is nearing the end of its stacking operations. Booster 19 static fire may be happening sooner than we think, and Starship HLS will not be landing on the moon for Artemis III. From Florida Space Coast to South Texas, we have all of this coming up and more on this week's Starship Update. After months of anticipation and a few road closures for transports between the production site and Massey's, Ship 39 has finally rolled out of Mega Bay 2 for the first time since it was fully stacked. On Wednesday evening, Ship 39's transport stand moved into Mega Bay 2 and the ship was lifted the very next day. But that's not the cryo stand. It's the distinct static fire stand used for, well, static fire testing at Massey's for both version 1 and 2 ships. The cryo stand is still occupied by Ship 39.1, which may be still testing of sorts. Big question mark there still. Upon arrival at Massey's, it headed straight to the static fire testing area, which features the brand new truss structure. As we detailed in last week's episode, this truss enables load testing on the ship's forward and aft flaps, plus the ship's catch points, simulating a tower catch to ensure structural integrity. With Massey's rebuild and upgrades following Ship 36's accident, both ground hardware, such as the tank farm and the ship itself, need thorough validation before flight. We should see some cryogenics loaded into Ship 39, perhaps at re-entry levels, but the truss testing will be a big highlight here as well, being the first time it's actually tested and run through. That being said though, full cryo testing requires a special stand with rams that push against the ship's aft section, simulating the forces of engine thrust while the tanks are loaded in flight-like conditions. It also verifies welding and tank integrity against bursting. We're looking at you, Booster 18. All of which Ship 39 cannot do here as it is currently configured on the static fire stand, meaning that an additional roll of Massey's would be required to perform said testing on the appropriate test stand. Of course, before rolling back to the production site again for engine installation. Now, it's possible that SpaceX could skip this part of testing entirely and push right for engine testing, but lacking any verification of structural integrity brings the risk of another Ship 36 style event. We have no doubt that SpaceX has learned from past mistakes, so it'll be interesting to see how things progress here. As luck would have it though, as in the night before recording this, it appears testing for Ship 39 has already started. An ambient pressure test appears to have occurred on the night of the 27th, and a cryo test itself occurred the night of the 28th into the morning of March 1st. Based on some imagery here from Caesar, it appears that Ship 39 received a nearly, if not completely full belly of cryo for a few hours before detanking just after midnight local time in Starbase. Recall what I had just said about probably not loading enough cryo to fill the tanks mostly? Might be eating my words a bit there already, and we're like just getting into the video. But the fact that it received a cryo load of this sort so soon after arriving shows promising signs of both vehicle integrity and confidence in the teams conducting the tests and pushing forward as much as they can with what they have. But now that it's at Massey's, we can finally have a more detailed look at some of the key differences between version 2 and version 3 ships. Safe to say that there has been some changes externally, of course, but many of the more detailed changes are internal to the stainless steel skin. While the overall size of the vehicle remains the same as version 2, SpaceX redesigned both the aft dome and common dome sections of the vehicle. The common dome, as the name suggests, is the dome that sits directly in between both liquid oxygen and liquid methane tanks. And even though it's in the same location as before, changing the shape of the dome can increase the capacity of the methane tank. Think of it like this. Instead of having a flat piece of metal sitting in between both tanks, the shape of the material between the tanks is a cone or a very elongated dome that points towards the LOX tank. By having this shape, you occupy some space of the LOX tank while extending the space of the methane tank. But just increasing the amount of methane on board without adding any more space for the required extra oxygen for combustion doesn't really get you any further. So to compensate, SpaceX lowered the position of the ship's aft dome to increase the LOX tank capacity. The Raptor vacuum engines, or RVACs, are also recessed farther into the aft dome to grant enough space inside the engine section. All these changes have given SpaceX, give or take, about 100 metric tons of extra propellant on board. which is pretty substantial. I mean, a full stack is like, what, 5,500 tons, almost 6,000 tons with version 3, but that's just a lot for ship. Speaking of the engines, both Block 3 Super Heavy boosters and ships will be debuting the Raptor 3 engines. Now, while SpaceX plans to eventually have 3 sea-level Raptors in addition to 6 RVACs on the ship, Block 3 will continue using 3 of each, as we've become used to by now from both version 1 and version 2 vehicles. Between the increase in thrust, a more simplified design reducing the number of components in the engine, and not requiring heavy shielding around each engine, Raptor 3 is an enormous leap forward in performance that aims to serve its vehicles well. To prevent the engines from melting during flight, cooling channels run through the engine itself, around the engine bell, throat, and combustion chamber, with its very own cryogenic propellant serving as coolant. Engine shelldown does not begin at ignition, however. It begins much earlier in the countdown to thermally condition the Raptor's turbopumps and plumbing. This is common practice for most liquid-fueled rocket engines because the temperature of any and all materials that the propellant comes in contact with is extremely hot, at least by comparison, even when the engine is not running. The relative difference in temperature between the room or ambient temperature of the engines and the super chill propellants is massive. If one was to flow any cryogenic fluid through an engine without proper thermal conditioning, they would do some serious damage to the engine, as the fluids would rapidly boil into a gas and expand. Something that the materialistic properties of said metal alloys usually don't like. To properly condition the engines down to their desired temperatures, SpaceX slowly begins to flow cryogenic fluid through the engine itself, just enough to lower the temperature of the engine, but not too much to avoid unnecessary gas buildup that risks damaging the engine. As it cools down, they can then increase the flow rate. SpaceX is also moving farther away from using glue to attach some of the tiles for the thermal protection system, or TPS for short. SpaceX favors pins over glue for tile installation. One reason for that is the new tile pin installation station inside a Starfactory, which allows SpaceX to further automate the installation of the TPS on the ship. Automation usually is faster. Another big step towards mass production for Starship. One area of the TPS where glue is still used is the very tip of the nose cone. But in time, we will likely see those tiles also be installed by pins. Ship 39's heat shield also lacks any deliberately missing tile sections that we had seen throughout the version 2 era. The entire heat shield is about 99% complete from what we can tell, with only a few tiles missing on the forward flaps, likely to be attach points for flap testing with Massey's truss structure, in addition to the gap between the flaps and the ship, which should be filled in before launch. Looking at the SQD port for version 3, several changes had been made between previous ships and now. The main difference in the new design is how the ports for all fluids and gases, including those for methane and oxygen, are located on the port itself. Hardware for docking is also plainly visible and required for 2 ships to dock with each other for on-orbit fuel transfer, which SpaceX needs to get done this year. This is the very first production ship to feature these, so we're curious to see how it'll evolve in the coming months and years. SpaceX has also done away with the bespoke lift points that were used to lift or lower the ships during full stack operations. It now has lifting points that we had previously seen on version 2 ships, although they were not actually used to lift the ship, but were rather used to test how the points would hold up during re-entry. Some smaller differences with the version 3 design are the relocation of the Starlink antennas from below the payload bay to the nose cone, more RCS thrusters for on-orbit maneuvering, and the redesign of the raceways that house plumbing and electrical work. More vents have also been created around the SQD port and include further reinforcements. Vent outlets are also introduced at the nose cone underneath where the tiles are located, sort of reminiscent of the shuttle's RCS thrusters in the nose. Interesting. In other news at Massey's, the S39.1 test tank still refuses to quit as it performed yet another cryo test this week. It was built to test the aft section of Block 3 ships and uses the cryostand with rams to apply engine forces to the aft of the test tank. Even though differences between version 2 and 3 aft sections are minimal, the aft dome isn't even a ring lower, it still needs validation against the expected thrust from the new Raptor 3s. Ship 39 itself would also need this very test stand as well if it is to perform a full cryo test, but satisfactory data would be needed before removing 39.1. At the Can Crusher, with B18.1 wrapping up its testing campaign, new hardware was lifted next to the cage this week, a ring stand and a cone structure. Built in the Sanchez lot, it was then transported to Massey's this week and installed here. Its purpose is still unknown, but we will of course be watching. After its last use on December 14th, 2023, some seemingly idle test hardware might be gearing up for new rounds at the Nosecone Jail this week. It's a weird name, I know. A small ring structure was lifted into it this week. However, its purpose is also unknown, but we might be seeing some more action here soon, so our cameras will be poised. Time for our McGregor Minute. We have once again spotted high production Raptor serial numbers and shattered the record for the highest Raptor 3 yet. It seems like SpaceX has been streamlining production at an incredible rate so far. But before diving into that, Let's rewind to the start of the week. On Monday, Raptor 3 RVAC serial number 103 was seen rolling from right to left. Now, I'm no McGregor layout expert here by any means, but it looks to be headed towards a test stand, followed by 2 RVAC lifts. The next day, another Raptor 3 RVAC that we couldn't exactly get the number on, and SN116 were both rolling around the site. SN116 not only tops the highest RVAC number that we've seen so far, but the highest Raptor 3 serial overall. Kind of ridiculous at this point. A day later, we spotted another flurry of engines, Raptor 3 RVAC SN77, an RVAC in the 110s range, and sea level 105. And if these 3 days of spotting weren't enough, February 25th brought 2 more unconfirmed Raptor 3 sea levels right by our cameras. To cap off the week, the 26th delivered 2 additional Raptor 3 sea levels, and a Raptor 2? And more specifically, SN440. Comparing Raptor 2 SN440 to Raptor 3 number SN116 is almost like mental gymnastics, seeing how far things have progressed since Raptor 2s were still in use. Speaking of all the Raptor 3s, teams at Starbase are likely well into the process of installing 33 Raptor 3 engines on Booster 19 inside of Mega Bay 1, prepping for Pad 2 verification and static fire testing. But Raptors aren't the only additions to Booster 19. On the 24th, our 24/7 live stream cameras caught a thin black object being lifted toward the booster. Could this be a grid fin? One of 3 that version 3 boosters use? We certainly think so. Unlike previous boosters, version 3 grid fins also serve as essential lifting and catch points for the chopsticks, since the catch pins are already built into them. We're pretty confident that this was a grid fin, but it's unclear how many have been installed so far. I mean, there's only 3, so I guess time will tell. It shouldn't be long now before the booster rolls out to Pad 2 for testing, which is, much like seeing 39 roll to Massey's, a long time coming. The ship assigned for Flight 13 has also been making progress. Of course, we're talking about Ship 40 inside of Mega Bay 2. Last week, we talked about how Ship 40's second LOX tank barrel, also known as the aft 3-4 section, was rolled out and stacked, bringing the ship to 17 rings tall. The next step for the ship was installing the transfer tubes, and oh, hey, what's that? Oh yeah! On the 22nd, the transfer tube installation jig with all of the transfer tubes was rolled into Mega Bay 2. After the design changes for version 2 ships bringing the transfer tube count to 4, not including the LOX header tank transfer tube, SpaceX continued with this design for version 3. But we already know that Ship 39 has been fully stacked for quite some time now and has followed the same process. A few days later, the jig left Mega Bay 2, meaning that installation was complete. Now with that out of the way, Ship 40 is now only missing a singular barrel section. We don't know when this will be rolled out and stacked, but we aren't thinking it'll be too long from now, all things considered. Let's go ahead and check in with Starfactory next door. Starting off with Ship 41, it still has its lifting points on its nose cone, and all but one of its heat shield tiles are intact, with OK marked on them, suggesting that they have been tested for correct installation. Ship 41 is also in line to be the next to be stacked inside of Mega Bay 2, although it still has to wait until Ship 40 is finished on the turntable and then moved over to a workstation for further assembly. Ship 42 still has a bunch of scaffolding around it. Tiles are still intact here with no holes drilled inside them, just like we have seen on both Ship 39 and Ship 40. A few more tiles are still missing on Ship 42. Here, you can still see the black ablative layer and also the felt for the crunch wrap waiting for the tiles to be installed there. Both what we believe to be Ship 43 and Ship 46 have not seen major changes in the last few weeks. And what we believe to be Ship 45 is still in the new tile pane installation station. And just as we thought there hadn't been any progress, Caesar himself spotted the nose cone receiving further tiles. Which is weird, because the next notable nose cone is Ship 43, which has yet to receive any form of installation pins, which are of course needed for mounting tiles. So maybe this nose cone is just for a general testing and not any specific flight. Or SpaceX has a deeper and more profound use or purpose for it. We will hopefully know more in due time. Do you guys remember Booster 17? You know, the one that was originally assigned to Flight 12 until Ship 36's explosive mishap at Massey's? Well, after sitting idle for months, it was mostly scrapped. Back in November of last year, the aft barrel section stayed on its transport stand and rolled into Sanchez, where it lingered for ages, until this past week. On the 23rd, a crane at Sanchez lifted the aft barrel off the stand and set beside it, likely to free up the stand for upcoming upgrades. We expect the barrel to head across to the scrapyard soon, though timing is a bit unclear. This definitively marks the end of Booster 17's lifespan, even in its final fragments. More structural beams for Gigabay construction have been delivered to the production site, and installation is ongoing. Beams are also still being painted, and tarps have been added around the sections of the first level, likely to block wind and dust from Highway 4. Across the road from the Gigabay, concrete pouring is complete, It looks like it could be a parking area, but we're not entirely sure yet. While we wait for further Booster 19 updates, Pad 2 has been ramping up testing as well. With the top deck deluge test checked off, crews have shifted to more general testing, including a few more deluge runs from the flame trench itself alone. Later in the week on the 27th, the chopsticks swept through their full horizontal range, their stabilizers moved, and both booster quick disconnects extended and retracted multiple times. This all signals that we are getting closer to seeing a booster on the launch mount, perhaps sooner than we think. As a reminder, no cryogenic fluids have flowed through the BQDs or other plumbing here yet, so expect small-scale tests first when the booster arrives here and passes ambient checks. That is, if they go that route. But safe to say that Pad 2 is looking phenomenal right now, and the fact that we have less to talk about here each week in terms of construction and finalizing tests is a telltale sign that it's almost showtime. Across the launch site at Pad 1, it's also somewhat of a quiet reporting week. Work here is continuing as teams drive further sheet piles outlining the future flame trench here, which will match that of Pad 2 and Launch Complex 39A here in Florida. We have also observed teams around the SQD arm as well, though we aren't exactly sure what they're up to. Maybe preparing for upgrades or modifications, as we've seen sparks coming out of the area. You guys can watch it for yourselves with Starbase Live 24/7, and let us know in the comments section down below what you think might be happening here, and when you predict Pad 1 to come back online for service. Okay, now let's dive a bit into a pseudo elephant in the room, though it isn't entirely Starship. Artemis III, as announced last Friday, has seen some huge changes in its mission profile, but for the sake of this being a Starship update, we will only focus on the Starship side of the equation here. As you all may know by now, SpaceX was selected as a contractor for NASA's Human Landing System, or HLS for short. Originally outlined as a landing on the moon for Artemis III, that's not the case here anymore. On the 25th of February, the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, also known as ASAP, posted their annual report for the year of 2025 and looking forward to 2026. Now, to keep this as short as possible without diving too deep into the weeds, the ASAP report expressed major operational and safety concerns regarding a landing with HLS for Artemis III, citing, quote, "The development and test progress necessary for a version of Starship that has not yet flown in time to support a human lunar landing mission within the next few years appears daunting and, to the panel, probably not achievable." Not really mincing words here. Beyond this, the physics of landing a 6:1 height to width ratio vehicle on the uneven, poorly lit lunar landing surface seems questionable at best. Yikes. The ASAP report was then followed by an announcement by NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman on Friday the 27th. Artemis III has been reprofiled to fly in low Earth orbit, where Orion will be tasked with testing around and potentially docking with the lander, or landers, in orbit. Yeah, landers plural, meaning Blue Origin could be in on this as well. It's safe to say that the pressure is on now and the gloves are off for Starship and the HLS equation here. The clock is ticking and there is a lot of work to get done to ensure timelines and goals are met, not just for the company here, but for the goals of NASA and the US government alike. Starship HLS will likely be launching from Space Launch Complex 37 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, SpaceX's newest Starship launch facility. And there are a lot more pieces to the puzzle to put down here before that becomes reality. More on that pad later. Now, staying on topic of future developments, but prying ourselves away from Artemis for a second, on February 24th, a new FCC license request was filed to, quote, "to launch and operate space stations on mass simulators for upcoming Starship Super Heavy test flights. To further test the payload deployment mechanism of the Starship vehicle, yada yada yada, SpaceX expects the mass simulators to demise within 90 minutes of deployment. These suborbital test flights will originate at Starbase, Texas, and are expected to reach peak altitudes of up to 350 kilometers. So what exactly does this mean? Is SpaceX going to launch an entire space station on the next flight? Well, pump the brakes, not quite. We expect this to be in relation to the Starlink mass simulators that SpaceX has been flying for the past few missions. Prior to this, they have not filed for any FCC licenses. So what this means now is that SpaceX is trying to communicate with these mass simulators of sorts. Like, maybe onboard cameras? Finally? How epic would that be to finally have an external view of Starship in space? I mean, that is literally renders becoming reality here, and in the best ways possible. However, we don't exactly know much more than that right now, but we will be sure to watch very carefully when the time finally comes for loading the simulators into Ship 39's payload bay, having said that they will plan to fly a few on Flight 12. This could also be regarding Flight 13 as well instead of Flight 12 though, as Elon himself made it sound like 13 was also flying on a suborbital trajectory. Now, to expand a bit further on that, Elon recently said on X that SpaceX will only try to catch the ship with the tower after 2 soft landings in the ocean, presumably to verify structural integrity, landing accuracy, control authority, amongst other factors in flight. That being said, if Flight 12 and Flight 13 go perfectly on the ship side here, at the earliest, it looks like Flight 14 could be on the docket here as the first on-site ship catch and recovery attempt. Keyword attempt. And also, completely unrelated, Elon also referred to Ship 39 as Starship version 3 serial number 1. Again with the naming changes. So are we back to the SN naming scheme? I honestly hope not. Even though it does make a lot of sense to keep better track of version 3 vehicles down the line, especially if they end up making tens or hundreds of them. But Ship 39 sounds a lot cleaner in my opinion. But of course, that's all subjective. What do you think? Let's wrap things up here and bring it home to Florida Space Coast. On the 23rd, right as night hit, 2 sets of launch tower segments rolled from the Roberts Road facility towards Space Launch Complex 37. We're pretty confident that the foundation isn't ready yet, so these modules are likely just being stored there until stacking can begin and to make room for other modules to be manufactured at Roberts Road. 3 days later, the ship quick disconnect forearm rolled to LC-39A, trailed by yet another Slick 37 tower module. We honestly didn't see that coming. All these kind of caught us pretty off guard. It's been fair to say. As of right now, the facility at Launch Complex 39A is coming along rapidly and looks to be in great shape as of now. With the SQD extension having been rolled out, we're just waiting for them to lift it into place and go through all necessary tests to ensure that it's functioning properly. Unfortunately, we don't get all the close-up views like we do in Starbase, but we still bring you the very best coverage that we possibly can on Space Coast Live, right here on YouTube. And with that, we are going to be closing out this week's Starship update. What do you guys think of the new Artemis III plans? Was it kind of destined to happen anyways? How long until Booster 19 rolls out to Pad 2? And when do you expect Ship 39 to conduct static fire testing at Massey's? Let us know all of your thoughts in the comments section down below. I'm Max Evans for NSF, and I'll see you guys next time.